WNYC Studios is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC, and now we'll begin our annual series on the feature-length documentaries up for an Oscar. Everyone else focuses on the entertainment films, and there's nothing wrong with that, but we feature the documentaries in our nonfiction show lanes. First up is The Perfect Neighbor, which premiered at Sundance and later became a breakout hit on Netflix. It tells the pretty devastating story of Ajika Owens, a mother of four who was shot by her neighbor, Susan Lawrence, in Florida in 2023. Now, Susan is white and Ajika was black. The film is constructed almost entirely from police body camera footage, which I'll note is a pretty impressive feat of editing. And it mostly depicts the 2 years leading up to this shooting, a period when Lawrence would frequently call the cops on the neighborhood kids, including Ajika's, for playing in a grassy lot next to her house. So we're watching an escalating neighborhood tension unfold in real time as the cops keep returning to this block to manage Lawrence's complaint. She starts to sound like a familiar archetype to some people, a kind of, you kids get off my lawn figure. But, of course, the racial overtones make it much darker and more ominous. And after a couple of years of increasingly inflammatory 911 calls and encounters with her neighbors, Lawrence shoots and kills Ajika Owens through her front door. Now, Lawrence was ultimately sentenced to 25 years for the killing, but the case and the documentary raise larger questions about Florida's stand your ground laws, which allow people to use deadly force if they believe they're in danger. You might recall back in 2012 when stand your ground laws faced a lot of national scrutiny after the killing of Trayvon Martin, that black teenager whose shooter was acquitted. Geeta Gandbhir is the director of the film, and she joins us now to talk about the movie and unpack some of its pretty heavy themes. We'll also hear some of the documentary clips. Geeta, welcome to WNYC. Thank you. Congratulations on your Oscar nomination. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
You made the decision to build this almost entirely from police body camera footage, along with other police materials like 911 calls. Why did you commit to that approach?
Sure. So starting from the beginning, Ajika Owens was a family friend, and that's how we got involved with the case. We were on the ground from day one, trying to raise awareness in the media, because we know with cases like Ajika's, without media pressure, they can often go they can go without justice, let's say. Oftentimes they can get swept under the rug or they can languish. So about 2 months in, after Ajika was murdered, we received the body camera footage from the family lawyers. They had used the Freedom of Information Act to acquire all the media that we used to make the film. And when we had a look at that footage, my team and I at Message Pictures, Nakan Kwantu, who's my husband and producer, and I watched it down, we realized there was a story there you hardly ever see when a crime is committed, which is what the community was like before and who they were before. Gun violence is so common. We often see the aftermath. We see the grieving family. We hear the story retrospectively. But with this material, we're able to recreate this beautiful multiracial community living together, loving each other, and tell the story of how one outlier with her access to a gun and emboldened by predatory laws like Stand Your Ground changed everything irrevocably.
So let me play a couple of clips. And context for this is that I've seen it said that the police, interestingly, do not come off as villains here in the way that some people might expect, that they're pretty sympathetic to the black families and kids living around this woman. I want to play a couple of clips from the film back to back, both to give our listeners a sense of the kind of immersiveness that the body camera footage gives the movie, and also to show some of the encounters that maybe will stand out. The first one is of a cop talking to a group of kids. This is just 11 seconds after one of Lawrence's many calls to the police.
Kids do this every day. Kids do this every day. She called the police.
Well, you're acting like a bunch of kids.
Yeah,
Which,
because we are kids.
I know.
Duh.
That's why we don't worry about it.
That's why we don't worry about it, says the police officer. And here's another one, 30 seconds of two cops debriefing after one of them talks to Susan, the shooter.
Did you not come at the door? She did. She did? Thanks, doctor. Okay. We explained to her that there doesn't need to be a call for service every time the kids are playing at the road or in the yard. Well, apparently they've been stomping it. I mean, that one looks like it's been stomped out too. Okay. Apparently they've been stomping out her signs and like running past her windows and screaming and like ding dong ditching her and knocking on her door. There does come a point where you kind of have to accept that you live with a bunch of kids. She's also the only one that ever calls.
So two police officers talking to each other. Obviously, that was after one of the many calls along the way, not after the shooting. But the cops seem to be aware, Geeta, that Susan Lawrence has a vendetta of some kind or an obsession, even though the kids might actually be messing with her a bit.
Yes. So what is so interesting about the police in this film is that indeed they don't come off as we might expect, and they don't come in guns blazing. They don't arrest anyone or shoot anyone. But what's interesting is my producer, Nakan Kwantu, often says that our bar for the police is so low that we mistake politeness for competence. And the worst possible outcome happened under their watch, which is that Ajika Owens was murdered and Susan Lawrence is ostensibly spending the rest of her life in prison. So although the police showed up and were empathetic to the community, they never saw Susan Lawrence as a threat. They brought their own biases to the scene. Again, had Susan Lawrence been a person of color, we think that this might have gone differently. But because she was able to weaponize her privilege, weaponize her race, and she tried to weaponize the police, she failed. But after so many calls, they should have flagged her as the problem. She was using hate speech against children. She was threatening them. She was filming them. She was doing things that were erratic and dangerous, and yet they just saw her as a nuisance, and they didn't see the community, a multiracial community, as worth protecting. And in Florida, where you can buy a gun, like you can buy a toaster oven or a microwave, you would think that it might raise alarms, and it didn't. And I think that is where, again, race came into play here again.
Listeners, it's part one of our five-part look at the 5 Oscar-nominated feature-length documentaries, which we do every year on this show. Today, talking to Geeta Gandbhir, director of the film The Perfect Stranger. We have about 5 or 6 minutes. Folks, anybody out there see this and want to say anything about it or ask the filmmaker a question? 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. So where do Florida's stand your ground laws come in?
So Florida's stand your ground laws, which are some of the most, some of the most dangerous in the country, come into play in that they basically state that stand your ground, just to back up a little, stand your ground exists in some shape, form, or fashion in about 38 states. The tenets vary state to state, but in Florida, essentially, the law allows individuals to use force, including deadly force in self-defense, without a duty to retreat. And they do not have to be in their homes. They can be anywhere, as long as they are there lawfully. And the threat can be perceived. It's, again, perceived threat, as we know, involves bias and can involve bias. So I think this is where stand your ground laws come into play. And Susan, essentially, who was treated as a nuisance, and the police eventually stopped responding to her, researched these laws. What we see with the numbers statistically is that homicide rates increase when this law is in play. And also, we see that if the shooter or the person who commits the violence in quote-unquote self-defense is white and the person on the other side of that violence is not, then they are more likely to get off when it comes to trying to use self-defense. And so that, again, is a problem. We saw that, as you mentioned before, with the case of Trayvon Martin, where George Zimmerman stalked him, and then an altercation happened, and he used Stand Your Ground. We also see Stand Your Ground adopted in other states and being used in the prison systems by prison guards as self-defense when there are multiples of them and one person who is killed. This happened in Alabama, so there's a case that we know of. So this is again an incredibly dangerous law that puts people of color at risk.
Mark in Brooklyn says he was in Florida when this happened. Mark, you're on WNYC. Hello. Mark, you there? Let's try William in the Bronx. You're on WNYC. I think William saw the film. William, hi.
Hi, good afternoon. I just want to say, first of all, I truly enjoyed watching this film. I work within the Bronx, and so we're constantly having a conversation about race and how race shows up in our community and how to be teamed with like NYPD and things of that nature. So I really appreciated this film. One of the things that you just said recently was about the competency versus the kindness of the cops and how at times that comes off, we kind of lower the bar. So I really appreciated that you brought that up, because a lot of times we do see that where the bar is so low, we take the kindness of the cops as competent and not really recognizing the need within the community and the threat in the community. So I really appreciate that you brought that up, and thank you for continuing this conversation.
Thank you
so much. Thank you for contributing to it. What do you think the police could have done more than be nice to the kids? How could they have prevented it if you think they could have?
So in my opinion, what they could have done was, by the third time she called, and we actually heard this from a former law enforcement officer in Utah who said to us, in my state, or by the third time she called and it was unfounded, she would have been flagged and she would have been given a warning or even a ticket for abusing emergency services and for calling repeatedly. And she also would have been warned about what she was doing to the kids. These are minors. So she was harassing them, and the other side would have been told that they could file restraining orders, that there was more that they could do. They could press charges. Susan, being the problem, would have been flagged sooner. I also believe, too, however, that the police are not trained for this in most cases. The police do not often serve communities of color. I think that there's having something else in place. There are cities that are using now alternatives to 911. They have programs and responders who come out who are social workers, therapists, and community mediators. That would have been so much more helpful, I think, than the police, who, again, they even say it in the film. They say, this is a civil issue. We don't deal with this. This is not our wheelhouse. And I think, again, the police are often used as a catch-all for everything, and it is dangerous for the community.
Let me sneak in one more caller who saw the film. Ellie in Brooklyn, you're on WNYC. Hi, Ellie. We have 20 seconds for you, sorry to say.
Hi, Brian and director. I found the film just quite compelling. I didn't have an opportunity to watch the trailer, so I just watched it as it prompted on Netflix. And it's just an interesting slice of life of what justice looks like for Black community, the Black and brown communities. And I thought it was just compelling storytelling and sad.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So as we run out of time, what would it mean to you or to the world, potentially, if this film wins the the Best Documentary Oscar?
So it would, of course, be the most incredible honor for us because, again, the Oscars are voted upon by our community, by our peers who we admire, who we're inspired by.
10
and
seconds.
That's incredible. But beyond that, it's a platform for the issues, and we want to have a greater impact and make change. So that's most important.
Geeta Gandbhir directed and made The Perfect Neighbor. This is the first of all 5 feature-length documentary nominees that we'll be focusing on in our annual series. Thank you very much for joining us. Good luck at the Oscars.
Thank you so much for having me.
WNYC Studios is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.